we attempted to apply the theme, and now let's go to some theories, principles, and more ideas to Univate. And for our main event, we are now ready to listen to the keynote message.
That's right. Thank you everyone for sharing. And also thanks to modern communication and technology, we can have our speaker for today live from Rome. Our Filipino speaker based in Italy has just completed her PhD in philosophy, specializing in ethics and anthropology, Pontificia Università della Santa Croce. In English, it's the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross. Her dissertation was titled In the Face of Another's Suffering, Passion, Thought, and Action in Compassion.
In 2010, she graduated AB Interdisciplinary Studies, Education Psychology, minor in Literature from Ateneo de Manila University. During her college and even in high school, she was active in rural services projects and catechism. She would already teach philosophy during those summers and organize study sessions and other volunteer work. Before going to Italy for her postgraduate studies, she was a teacher, mentor, and outreach organizer in Paraf Southcrest School for Girls in Cebu, Punlaan School.
To enlighten us more about the UNIV 2022 theme, Rebuilding Together, the Strength of Human Relationships, let us welcome Dr. Pia Garcia. You now have the virtual floor.
Myself. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Erica and Eliza, for your introductions. Let me just see how I get this set up. All right. Good afternoon again. My name is Pia Garcia. Some of you know me, and the speakers, the MCs have already said a lot about me. But I wanted to tell you a little bit more about myself so that it doesn't feel like you're talking to a complete stranger. Because to be honest, with the way things are now, I'm here on the screen, it's full of other screens, I'm talking to a camera. You could be watching any video on YouTube, but I'm not a YouTube video. I'm actually here. I am with you in real time. It is 5 a.m. my time and 11 a.m. your time, just to be exact. And despite the distance, I am with you, with all of you, and with each of you, here and now in this virtual space. Sadly, that means you can't rewind me or fast forward me or hit pause to go to the bathroom. But if you get very, very bored, you can put me on mute. But that doesn't make for a promising relationship. So it's probably the first lesson of this talk. To continue with my introduction, aside from everything else that the MCs have said about me, I'm the eldest of 6 fantastic brothers and sisters. You can see them over here, so that you know them. We were all born, raised, and educated in Manila. My passion has pretty much always been teaching because I liked helping other people grow. I realized I was good at understanding what others were not understanding and helping them find their way out of their own puzzles. Like the MC said, I moved to Cebu a year after graduating. And after 3 years of teaching, I came here in Rome, and I came here to Rome in 2014 to study philosophy. It was a big move for big reasons. And more than anything, I chose philosophy because I thought it could help me do my job better, which was precisely that of helping people grow. That's why I did my doctorate in ethics and anthropology, because they explored the questions which were very important to me. What should I do to be happy? Who am I? What am I? All those big questions. And philosophy didn't give me all the answers, because it never does, but it does make me, and it could make you see things differently. In fact, good philosophy can make your vision of life broader, higher, and deeper. And that's probably why I ended up here before you today. Before anything else, I wanted to give you a little preparation of what it's like to listen to a philosopher, especially this philosopher. I think the best way for you to go about this is to act as if you were on a safari. Like a safari, like going through not the desert, but going to the African wildlands. Because I'm the driver and I'm the guide, and you're going to see a huge panorama, a huge horizon. But sometimes while I'm talking, you might not be able to really tell where I'm going or what you're going to see. But it's okay. Just sit back, relax, be in the moment, and keep your eyes open for the sights and the ideas that might help you. So I wanted us to start with 3 pictures that have one message, right? First, this girl. You note how she's in a flood, the water's very muddy. You can see the fear that's etched into the crease between her eyebrows. You can see the figures hurrying away through the flood. And around this girl, we have a strange circle of hands that are all making a thumbs up. Second, this woman. She is seated on the ground and she's holding the body of a little boy. The woman's face is hidden, but you can feel her pain through the way she cradles the face of the little boy. The boy's eyes are glazed and his mouth is open, and the splatters on his trousers look a lot like blood. Around them, you can see the same circle of thumbs up. Third, this child. He seems about a year old. The hospital room he's in doesn't seem like it's the best. His large eyes stare soberly out at us, and his form is limp with a quietness that jars us along with a bandage-wrapped stump where his leg obviously used to be. Yet again, around this little boy, we have the same strange circle of thumbs up. The message: liking isn't helping. Flood, war, and earthquake were part of a 2013 campaign run by Crisis Relief Singapore. They were all published as outdoor advertisements. The campaign called people to be a volunteer and change a life. This campaign played on the phenomenon of social media likes, and it made the point that clicking addresses the guilt, but doesn't relieve the pain of the people who are actually in horrible situations. Thus, it made a call to take action that actually alleviates suffering and changes the situation of those who suffer. The company that developed the ad won multiple awards for it on at least 8 different occasions in Asia, America, and Europe. We can see that the photos of disasters surrounded by likes and the clear criticism of feeling without effective action clearly struck a chord worldwide. Alistair MacIntyre, a moral and political philosopher still alive today, tells us that if human beings do not respond to an urgent and dire need, just because it is an urgent and dire need, they will lack their very humanity, something without which we will be defective in our social relationships. The Liking Isn't Helping campaign touches this very nerve, and even seems to specify what the good response to urgent and dire need should be. On one hand, the suffering of others can move us and does move us, as shown by both the fact that we do often like pictures to show our support and by the international recognition this campaign has gathered. In fact, one might say that the suffering of others should move us. At the same time, it doesn't seem to be enough to just be moved by the other's suffering. And this is what allows the campaign to cut deep, making us almost flinch. Its full message challenges us to go beyond feeling and to take action, intelligent action that really helps the other out of his plight. This UNIV, we are given a chance to think about rebuilding together the strength of human relationships. The photos I showed earlier and our own personal experience or witnessing of social problems, suffering, and structural ills probably make us grab onto this theme because we immediately agree. There is much that needs to be rebuilt. The pandemic, a worldwide experience of suffering, has made us feel this need even more. But I think, when I was preparing for this talk, and I was thinking about it, I think we could be prone to falling into a trap. And that trap is this. Sometimes we can focus too much on the rebuilding without understanding the relation. What do I mean by this? As the MCs have said, my philosophical research was on compassion. And one of the interesting challenges I found was this mentality. These are the words of Baruch Spinoza, a 17th century philosopher. And he was basically saying, with our mind alone, we are capable of identifying and solving the problems of others. We are capable of addressing, just with our mind, the suffering of other people. So why feel compassion? Spinoza was of the opinion that emotions in general were not necessary, and before another person's misfortune, one need not and even must not feel compassion. His reasons do not fit inside this talk, but if you want to research, I can let you know. We can ask ourselves, does he have a point? Is it really enough to just be problem solvers of society? Is it really enough to simply find practical solutions? What can we answer? So we're now going to play a game. You heard me right? And for this game, I am going to need you to, well, not all of you because I can't see all of you, but I'm going to need a lot of you to turn on your cameras. This game, when I used to play it in class, I used to call it Look at Me. And the idea is that if you agree or if you particularly feel the statement that you see on screen, I want you to look at me, right? This means that you have to look at the camera because if you're looking at the screen, I'm not going to be able to see you look at me. So if you identify yourself with the statements I'm going to show, please look at the camera. Okay. All right, so are you ready? Okay, first statement. I wish I had someone to talk to. Okay, I can see the people who are looking at me, and I'm actually looking. I'm scrolling through the screens to see who's looking. All right. Thank you very much. Next. This person doesn't get me. Okay. Don't worry, I'm not going to read your name if I see you looking. This is why I didn't ask you to raise your hands, because that can be kind of scary. Okay. Next statement. I wish I had someone to share this with. It can be something good or something bad. Okay. All right. Last statement. Oops. Last statement. It's hard being alone. Okay. Thank you very much for your participation. This got intensely personal because I think these experiences shed light on something very much in our human nature. And it is really this, that relation is important. We cannot rebuild without relation. Social problems are fundamentally human problems, and it is not enough to just write and change structures, but we must do so in a human way. Now, I've already said relationships are very, very important. And what I'm going to try to do now is try to make this importance explicit. So we've all felt it in our own experience, the experience of loneliness, the experience of wanting to have another person to talk to. We, I think, all agree on this idea that relationships are important. And now we want to try to understand this better. Our experience of forced isolation now because of the pandemic has practically made us jump out of our seats and say, relation is important, I feel you. But it's not much to say that relationships are important because if we don't have them, we feel lonely. And loneliness is terrible. Why is loneliness such a tragedy for the human person? This is one of the questions that we're going to try to ask today. I said we can fall into the trap of focusing on rebuilding without understanding the relation. And I think that generally we fail to understand relation in two ways. First, we fail to understand how fundamental relationship is to our being. And with this, I'm going to give more reasons than lack of relation is a terrible experience, and that without them, we do not survive, because relationship is more than a matter of survival. Now, because we don't get how fundamental relation is, we tend to fall into number two. We fail to understand where we tend to go wrong. So let's go to the first. What does it mean to be relational beings? When I say relationship is fundamental to us and that there's something, or rather, why do I say that relationship is fundamental to us and that there's something we're not getting? So now you can think of some of the more important questions you have probably asked yourself in life, especially when you're feeling rather lost in the world. And maybe one of them is, how did I get here? Where do I come from? What was my background? What is my story up until now? What do I want to remember and what do I not want to remember about my past? Another important question is, who am I? I think everybody asks this at some point in their life or at many points in their life. Another important question is, where am I going? When we ask these questions, we're actually asking about our origin, our identity, and our purpose. These are the topics, the themes, the points of life that really get to us. And the thing is, for these important questions, for every important question, when we look at the answer, we realize that there is a relationship behind the answer to each of these. I would not exist without a relationship between two people. Those who believe in God would say that we cannot have come into being without someone giving us existence. We cannot be here without someone giving us life. We can see that in our very beginning, our very origin is relational. I did not make myself. These relations at our beginning, like it or not, make me. And you can see this even in the way we introduce ourselves. Like when I was introduced, I had to have a first name and a last name. The last name tells you who my parents are. I also introduced myself by introducing my brothers and sisters, because especially in our culture, I think being a brother or a sister changes who you are. We even have words to refer to that relationship. Ate, kuya. These are words that some cultures don't have because maybe they don't understand that relationship, so they don't underline that relationship so much. So my very beginning and my very origin is relational. And I am also made for relation, which is why loneliness is such a sharp and all-encompassing experience. I was made for community, to be part of something, to work towards a good, and to live in love. Deep in us is a need to know that we came from love, that love is our origin, and that we are made for love, that love is also our purpose. One of the greatest deceptions that we have to face today is that we are self-sufficient, that I make me. We do not realize how much origin in others and purpose for others shape our identity. When we cannot find the answer to either, we feel lost. Alasdair MacIntyre has pointed out how we do not even learn how to think, choose, and feel without the help or without the example, without the network of other people. We are dependent on others at every stage of life, and in some stages of life more than others. When we are children, when we are old, relationality is deeply inscribed into our being. Now we can ask, where do we tend to go wrong? Where do we, the children of the 21st century, tend to go wrong? What does the world tell us? More or less, what the world often tells us, the message we often get, is that our happiness lies in our relationship with things. We are pushed, pressured, even subconsciously by everything we see to own more, to achieve more, maybe to get more degrees, to get good grades, to possess more, to have a higher standard of living, and to control more, to have my plan set out for I don't know how many years in the future. Because we think we'll be happy this way, we sometimes transfer these relationships to people. And well, we already know how this is going to turn out. Like unconsciously, maybe because we think that we have to have everything under control, or because when we make our choices, we're always seeking to achieve more. We, in our relationships, tend to want to own, to possess, to control, or to dominate other people. But we cannot do that. And we know that we ourselves do not want to be controlled or dominated. Yet, we do see this in our society. Here are some words of Pope Francis from one of his homilies in 2019. We fed ourselves on dreams of splendor and grandeur and ended up consuming distraction, insularity, and solitude. We gorged ourselves on networking and lost the taste of fraternity. We looked for quick and safe results, only to find ourselves overwhelmed by impatience and anxiety. Prisoners of a virtual reality, we lost the taste and flavor of the truly real. Here it seems like the Pope is highlighting how many of us, or our society as a whole, has preferred to go for what's controllable rather than what's not. That is my online life, my image, my consumption of products. And the truth is, we don't ever really control it. Anyone who's felt the pressure of like posting stuff on social media probably has felt this. On the other hand, we also see in the news around us, and sadly in the society around us, patterns of instrumentalization, power play, and manipulation. And it sounds very gloomy, but it's very subtle there in our society. I'm talking about relationships even at work, such as when employees are unfairly treated for profit, or connections when connections are dishonestly used for gaining power. I'm also talking, sadly, about some personal relationships. Sometimes in friendships, you can feel like you're being instrumentalized. And sometimes even in romantic relationships, you feel like you're unconsciously using the other for your own self-esteem. Sometimes this instrumentalization even comes with a friendly face. I'm thinking specifically of how often we are, in workshops or stuff like that, we can be taught how to win friends and influence people. But if you think about it, if your only purpose for learning this is to get what you want, that's rather creepy. But anyway, these are not the type of relationships that we should have with people. And the philosophers knew that too. Aristotle tells us that there are relationships based on pleasure and others based on usefulness, but the best relationships are those of virtue, where you wish or want the good for the other. Why should we want the good for another person? Kant tells us that a person is an end in himself and not a means, and that's why he cannot be used as an instrument for other ends. Now, when he says this, what he means is that because we have in each of us the powers to act ethically, our intellect, our will, and our heart, because we are free, and this freedom must be respected for each of us to reach his or her purpose. They cannot be used for the purposes of another. But Karl Wojtyła, also known as Pope John Paul II, improved even upon this, because when we get here to what Kant says, it sounds pretty good. We're all like ends in ourselves and we can't be used, right? But I think an even better attitude is the one proposed to us by Karl Wojtyła. He tells us that the person is a good towards which the only proper and adequate attitude is love. What is worth the human person are relationships that recognize, nourish, and perfect our personhood, that seek our good, respect and cultivate our freedom, and enable us to love and be loved. One idea I learned in my research on compassion is that your idea of the human person and what he or she is for changes everything. I saw it mostly in the compassion when I was comparing the compassion of Aristotle with the compassion of Thomas Aquinas. Aristotle grew up in ancient pagan Greece and Aquinas was a Christian. Aristotle thought that compassion was good, but he didn't think it was super important. And he didn't think that it made us help people. Right? Aquinas, on the other hand, thought that compassion was very, very important, was of utmost importance. It was the virtue that made us look most like God. And he thought that we are morally obliged to help other people to help the other out of his suffering if we can. And when I researched more, I realized that this is because Aquinas not only thought we had a common human nature that should be respected, he didn't only say that we are free and therefore each of us should help each other out of respect. Aquinas' affirmation was more powerful. We all have a common purpose. We were all made for happiness and eternal life. And this common purpose unites us deeply and makes us responsible for each other, which is why compassion shows us that we wither or flourish together. So what I propose to you is not just to find ways of rebuilding together, but to rebuild the strength of relationships. And we can ask ourselves, how? Now, from this point on, I'm just going to give a set of ideas that you can take, the ones that you find most attractive, the ones that you find most helpful, and I will also tell you more or less how I think these ideas can influence your research, right? If you want to rebuild the strength of human relationships, I would say, think about this. Think about human dignity. That is, ask yourself the question, what is a human person and what is he for? I think this could be particularly interesting for students of economics, business, and even medicine. But it's interesting for everyone, but specifically for the fields of economics, business, and human medicine. On one hand, you can try to research how economic structures can be more humane. How can they treat people more as people and less as numbers? In businesses, you can ask yourself, how does a particular company respect or foster the dignity of its workers? How it doesn't use them as a means to, how we can change the dynamic of using the employee as a means to the end of the company. And even in medicine, it's an interesting question. I'm specifically thinking of a new trend, which is called narrative medicine, I think, where the point is you treat the person not just based on his symptoms, but based on his whole life story. So you could research into that. That's very interesting. To rebuild the strength of human relationships, you can also think about this, similarity and difference, because both are necessary for a relationship. And I think this is very important for our world today, because if there's one thing that we learn from living online a lot, it's that things get very polarized. Messages get very extreme. We don't know how to agree with each other anymore because we always just disagree. But to have a relationship, you have to have both difference. Difference is important. So you have to be two different things to be able to relate. But you also have to have some sort of similarity. So this theme could be particularly interesting for communication students and even for students of politics, because one of the big questions is, how do you coordinate all the different interests into one entire society? You can also think about this. In vulnerability and dependence is our strength. And down there, I cite some authors. Well, Brené Brown is a psychologist now, and Alistair McIntyre is a philosopher I cited earlier, who can possibly give lights on these topics. One of the interesting things about vulnerability and dependence is that other people are outside our control, and that is a risk we must accept to be happy. Accepting that others are out of our control is a risk that entails vulnerability. It means being ready to kind of get hurt. But it is precisely this risk of losing control over the other person that makes space for gift. It changes the dynamic of any relationship from control and manipulation into giving and receiving, into listening and being able to accept the other person. And that way you can form networks of giving and receiving, which is something that McIntyre talks about. You can also think about this. What is necessary to initiate, build, and nourish human relationships? Especially now, when many of our relationships are online, we can ask ourselves, how do we keep them going? What dynamics should we follow? And we can also ask ourselves about the role of the body and the soul. Here, I was specifically thinking that this could be interesting for students of psychology and even chemistry, because specifically I'm thinking of emotions and the chemistry of emotions. That could be something to study if that is your field. It's also interesting for students of education, and in general, all the themes I've been talking about are interesting for students of the arts, film, literature, or social communications, because they can study how these messages are fostered or not in our society. We can also think about specific personal relationships and how the other aspects, human dignity, similarity and difference, vulnerability and dependence, and the nourishment of relationships, how all of these things are reflected in these specific relationships: family, friends, romance, spousal relationships, work. There's a lot to say here, but basically the idea is you could also take a specific relationship and see how it particularly shows or particularly supports one of the things above. And from personal relationships, you can move to society and community, because good personal relationships lead to good society and community relationships. Here we have the theme of social friendship, which is something that Pope Francis talked about in his encyclical Fratelli Tutti. And finally, if all of these did not yet give you ideas, and if you want bigger fish to fry, another interesting set of relationships to think about is relating to the infinite, or relationship with God. This is particularly interesting, I think, because one thing that you could ask is how thinking about one's capacity to relationship to the infinite can change or can influence the relationships you have with everyone else. This being said, UNIV is not just a call to action. It is also a call to reflection. It's a call to understanding. So that when you rebuild on a strong foundation, which is your understanding of truly human relationships. And I end with this quote from Pope Francis's encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, because I think it summarizes everything. Human beings are so made that they cannot live, develop, and find fulfillment except in sincere gift of self to others. Nor can they fully know themselves apart from an encounter with other persons. I communicate effectively with myself only insofar as I communicate with others. No one can experience the true beauty of life without relating to others, without having real faces to love. This is part of the mystery of authentic human existence. Life exists where there is bonding, community, communion, fraternity. And life is stronger than death when it is built on true relationships and bonds of fidelity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Pia Garcia, for that very insightful and thought-provoking explanation of this year's UNIV theme. So I'm sure Alyssa and everyone here is challenged and excited to forge and build relationships. So do you have any questions? If ever, you can send it in the chat box right now, or you can direct message us, Alyssa and me, so that we can ask it. Or if you wish, you can also unmute. Just raise your hand.
Okay. Thank you for that, Erica. So throughout the whole lecture or discussion, I was just seeing a lot of heart reactions and clapping reactions. That just proves how good the talk was. It was really touching and very, very relevant, especially in this time. So it's amazing how Pia was able to touch our personal lives through a screen, even challenging us to rebuild, reflect, and understand. So I'm sure there will be some questions. As Erica said, please send your questions in the chat box. So I have one now, so I will just read it for Ms. Pia, for Doc Pia to answer. So first we have, what can you say about the current state of human relationships, especially in times of conflict and strife like during the pandemic?
Mm-hmm. What can I say about the current state of human relationships? I actually think, and I think there are many people who share this opinion, that the pandemic has made us see how the state of human relationships prior to it was not very good. I mean, like, I think if we go back, because if we go back to, well, the pandemic has made us see how much we need it. No, which is why when I asked the questions at the beginning, everyone was able to relate to it. Because if you haven't felt lonely in this time, no, I don't think there's anyone who's not felt lonely in this time, even if you live in a house full of people. Um, I think that one of the things I notice most, at least from my own experience in talking to people, is what I said about how we sometimes tend to treat other people as things, even subconsciously. We don't mean to, no, but that the expectations that we have from our friendships, the expectations we have from our relationships, is like, why do we get upset when we interpret someone as not being our friend or not doing something for us? It's because we have this expectation of control. No, not that I want to dominate the other person, but sometimes it's like I get upset because I cannot control like what's happening in my relationship. No? And sometimes also it's like I tend to and it's a human weakness. I mean, there's no shame in admitting it. But sometimes we also have to be aware if we tend to pick up or drop other people because what they say upsets us or what they say does not upset us. Like we tend to make relationships only based on whether they agree with us or disagree with us. So you really have to learn how to be friends or how to make a relationship with someone who doesn't agree with us. No? So I think first the pandemic has shown us how we really need relationships, but it's also shown us like how we turned into this sort of society. No? Conflict and disagreement, I'm not sure if you're referring to how online debates are so heated, no? Which is at least what came to mind when you mentioned it. Because when you talk about conflict happens at many levels everywhere. No? But it is true that now, when our only platform of discussion is online, we tend, I think, I'm not sure if you've seen the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, and if you should like see it. It makes you like sort of doubt everything you see. But then one of the interesting points that that documentary brings up is how the algorithms of Google make us see only what we like, what we want to see. No, so if we think of the world as a conflictive, I don't know, of a certain political color and very conflictive, we're only going to see things of that color. And that documentary showed how when we translate this to real life, what happens is you can't dialogue with the other person anymore because you're not used to listening to the reasons of the other person. So I think that's one thing we have to be very aware of, how to listen to each other and how to accept the differences of the other and see how from there we can build to something common. Because in any relationship, this is over time, not just now. But the key to holding two parties together is to have something common, like a common goal. And it's very funny because I'm actually learning that from John Paul II in his Love and Responsibility. Like he's talking about a personal relationship, but he's pointing out how two very different things can be united in something common. I don't know if this answers your question. Or I could go on forever, but probably better not. Yeah.
Thank you for that very thorough answer, Pia. I'm sorry. Is there echo? Okay. So I guess there's none. So due to the time limits, we can only accommodate one question. But for everyone who sent in the questions, don't worry because we are going to send it to Pia and get back to you. So thank you very much for that. Erica?
Okay, so thank you very much again, Dr. Pia Garcia. At this point, we would like to present our certificate of appreciation to our guest speaker.
Thank you.
So, UNIV Asia Pacific 2022, this certificate of recognition is proudly presented to Pia Patricia K. Garcia for her invaluable contribution as keynote speaker during the UNIV Asia Pacific 2022 launch held on the 16th of October 2021 via Zoom. Signed by Florides Anda, UNIV Asia Pacific 2022 team head. So, Dr. Pia, may we request if we can take a group photo with you?
Of course.
And may we also request the participants to on their cameras for our photo op.
Come on, guys, show us your smiles.
Please, you just hold your smile. We have 7 screens. Okay, I'll take na. 1, 2, 3. Second. 1, 2, 3. Next. 1, 2, 3. Next one. 1, 2, 3. Fifth. 1, 2, 3.
Oh my.
2 more. 1, 2, 3. Last one. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Doc Pia. I hope you have a nice day. Thank you for gracing us with
Yeah.
your presence.
I just realized, may I end with one last thing? Because this happens to me sometimes. You ask me a question and I do the answer like 5 minutes later. No, but I think like if there's anything also that's important, it's to take care of your friendships. Like this is related to the first question. Well, the only question. Because I think friendship is something we don't understand very much, and it's one of the most important relationships that we have. Punto. Period. Okay. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, Pia.
Thank you.